Welcome. Good afternoon. Thank you very much for coming. Thanks for sitting here for 5 minutes, staring at me, walking back and forth behind the podium. So today, we're going to be talking about how to use social media insights in the most strategic way possible. We're going to be using social media insights to better understand consumers and consumer opinions online and use that data to inform marketing strategy and tactics and really business strategy and tactics. So before we begin, I'd like to sort of lob a question out to the group. How many in this audience are doing some form of social media monitoring and analysis today? Show of hands. Okay, so probably about 50%, maybe 60% of the group. That's great. I'm very happy to hear that you're analyzing social media and gaining some value from that analysis. Another question, for those of you who are monitoring social media, how many of you feel that the insights you're getting from your social media monitoring are fit to send to the CEO right when you get them? Raise. Maybe two? I'm glad for you two. This session is really about learning to get your insights to be of such quality that they're ready for the executive team, that they can inform executives in building that next series of decisions that will result in your next new product, in your next marketing strategy, what have you. So this is perhaps something that all of you understand, but it's worth stating. Social media is the single largest source of unsolicited consumer opinions ever. There's never been a time in history when more information was being created and captured directly by consumers ever in the history of man. This is an incredibly powerful moment for us all in terms of being able to capture this data and leverage it and distill it in a way that it can be used powerfully for a business. This is market research turned on its end. You never ask anyone a question, yet they're offering you insights, perspectives by the billions, day in and day out, about you, your products, your competitors' products. It's a massive, mostly untapped resource. So, in the case of Crimson Hexagon, we've actually been analyzing and archiving social media posts since our founding in 2007. And since that time, we've actually collected 245 billion posts. And this library, we call it our social media data analysis library, grows by 1 billion new posts every 2 days. So 500 million posts a day we're absorbing into our library. Now we absorb and index and analyze a lot, but there's a lot more. So just to give you a sense of the scale of this information and the amount of information that's coming at us all each day that we make relevant for our customers. So have you all heard of the term social listening? Show of hands. Yeah, most everybody. How about the term social intelligence? A few. So we prefer, and we think there's more business value to the concept of social intelligence. Social intelligence is sort of like business intelligence, something that you would get from business intelligence software, where you're collecting internal data sources, ERP data, CRM data, other sort of mostly numeric data that your business systems are creating and making available for analysis by your executive team. Social intelligence is the same concept, except the data source that's yielding that intelligence is all social media data. It's all qualitative information captured from conversations rather than quantitative information, which is numeric, volume, numbers-oriented. The numbers-oriented stuff is much easier to capture and get some sense of understanding from. Qualitative information, which are the context inside of conversations, which are written posts, missives, if you will, between you and your friends. That's really hard to quantitatively value, and that's where the power is. So Forrester Research, which some of you may be familiar with, actually invented the term social intelligence. We've spelled out their definition of it here. The analysis of customer data from social sources used to activate and recalibrate marketing and business programs. So this is about creating a virtuous circle between social media data that is being created by consumers in reaction to what you're doing as a corporate brand or an agency or even an individual, and then feeding that information back into the business, creating that virtual circle of information creation, distillation, analysis, and action, continuously creating, again, a virtuous feedback loop for the company. And that, if you can achieve that, you're going to have executive-ready insights that are ready for the CEO, and you're going to have insights that have real value. Not clicks, likes, follows, but what did people really think and feel about the brand? It's important. We always recommend to our clients that they think this way, that they approach it from the perspective of how can this data impact the business? How can they achieve social intelligence? So this is both the opportunity and the challenge to quantify the qualitative on a massive scale in near real time. So you just saw 245 billion posts, a billion a day. That's a massive amount of information. It's all quantitative in nature. It's all conversations. So how do you analyze it in such a way that you can actually analyze hundreds, thousands, millions, billions of conversations quickly? Because even this room full of human beings could not analyze that scale of conversation quickly. And how do you do it accurately and in a meaningful way that you can get social intelligence from? So this is the challenge. What are the characteristics, sort of if you could achieve a holy grail of social media analysis and the value that you can get from social media analysis? It would probably contain these factors. You would want to be analyzing the social web. You would want to be able to analyze the social web in a language-independent fashion. You would want to potentially absorb proprietary data, so internal survey data, internal databases that aren't social data, and you'd want to be able to compare and contrast that with market data, because correlating these three sources are really where all the power is in terms of business analysis and strategic value. This is obviously a massive big data set. If 245 billion posts or 500 billion posts is not big data, I don't know what is big data. But these are the characteristics that we would recommend you think about when analyzing social media data. Are you doing it in a comprehensive enough way, in a meaningful enough way, and can you correlate what you're learning from the social web with traditional business data or other data sources? Because it's the connection between those two things that shows that you're delivering value, or maybe not delivering value, which is also an outcome of analysis. So one of the things that's very common in the industry and that constitutes most of the way the industry operates today is to analyze and measure sentiment. Positive, negative, and neutral sentiment. You analyze a large conversation, perhaps a few 100,000 or a few million posts on a particular topic, and you get some sense of, okay, for a given keyword that I care about, 50%, 60% is positive, the remainder is negative, or maybe some percentage of neutral thrown in there. And that's interesting, but not particularly valuable. So most analysis methodologies would give you a sense of volume. This is sort of a blind case study of a major automotive brand that we work with. It's a US domestic automotive manufacturer. This particular conversation has almost 103,000 mentions of this brand in it. And we can see that 66% of this particular conversation is positive, 23 negative, 11% neutral. And again, this is interesting and valuable to know if you're that particular brand, but it's not really a strategic value. If you were to give this in a report to the CEO, they would wonder perhaps why you're giving it to them and what they're supposed to do with this. Where it really gets interesting is if you can break the positive, negative, and neutral down into its thematic categories. This is what we talk about when we say getting to the quantitative measure of qualitative information. So you can see here in the positive category, 11% say they love the brand of these 103,000 folks. 9% say it's a legendary brand. 18% are expressing the desire to buy one. They want one. 9% are expressing a desire that they like looks and design, 11% performance, 8% people that like the business. They think they're a good business partner. On the negative side, 11% saying, boy, this thing's a maintenance headache, I don't want to deal with it. 12% expressing that they prefer a specific competitor. And in the neutral category, asking advice. So if you are a marketer and you are trying to figure out how to align your advertising creative, your messages, with what will resonate best with the consumer here is telling you, for example, that they feel that the brand is legendary, that they love the brand. So there are key aspects of the brand character, if you will, that if you have this information, you can weave into your advertising. You can get these emotive factors woven into your messages and remove the risk of failure from your advertising campaign. So this is an example of where digging deeper, going beyond simple volume or positive and negative sentiment to the actual drivers of the sentiment. These are the reasons why it's positive, why it's negative, so on and so forth. That's where you start to get real strategic value. Here's an example of an analysis we did taking a look at Netflix. Now you remember some time ago perhaps that Netflix really sort of screwed up its business for a period of time, and they've since recovered quite a bit, but they decided a little while back to break up their business, to say we're going to have an online-only business where you've got streaming video, and we are going to have a DVD distribution business through the mail. And we're going to split those up, and we're going to change the pricing. This had a massive impact on the way the public felt about Netflix. You can see here, not surprisingly with this move, 65% of the category, or rather of the commentary was negative, only 21% positive. But why? For example, why was it negative? So in general, people just thought, hey, this is a bad move for Netflix. In the United States, we have a competitor to Netflix called Redbox. And this was a huge driver of people gaining interest in Redbox. You can see the category of conversation, goodbye Netflix, hello Redbox. Now, if Redbox had this information and they are not a client, this would be a moment where Redbox marketers could seize this energy, this particular sentiment, and turn that into business promotions to capture more users. And then you can see here 13% actually expressing the intent to leave the service, to not use Netflix as a service. And this was an analysis of about 210,000 online opinions solely from Twitter. So you may remember about a year and a half ago, the newly married royal couple made a trip across the pond and visited Canada, went across Canada, and we had the opportunity to analyze Canadian opinions of the royal couple's visit, their tour through Canada. And one of the interesting things is the sentiment expressed, the opinions expressed, gave the sense that people thought it was a great rebranding of the monarchy, that the sort of fresh-faced new couple was a great face moving forward for the monarchy. People expressing pride, simple love for Will and Kate, anticipating and excited about their visit, and also a fairly large contingent because apparently they didn't go to Toronto and Vancouver, major areas in Canada, and people were upset about that. Now, the royal couple, after leaving Canada, actually landed in LA and attended a conference. We actually had the opportunity to present this analysis to the royal couple. They were very interested in this. They had literally just gotten off the plane, showed up at this conference. It was, of course, planned that they were to attend this conference, and we were to give them this demonstration. And, of course, we analyzed what they had just done. They were quite interested in it. So anyway, having a little fun here, but a fun moment for us. So here are some examples now. I'm moving quickly. I know we're probably going to finish up a little bit early, which will give you the opportunity to answer some questions, or for me to answer your questions. Hopefully you'll have them. So here's an example of industry research that you can perform. So we did an analysis of the luxury hotel category. So one of the things that was surprising to us was the fact that so much of the online conversation, this was tens of thousands of online opinions analyzed, was discussion about price and price consciousness. You can see 24%, so the second largest category here, expressed sensitivity to pricing. So despite there being luxury properties, even folks who can afford to go and stay at luxury hotels have price sensitivity and are still looking for bargains. Again, something that's very important to marketers for these properties. If you want your promotions to resonate, price consciousness and price promotion is still a good thing to do even with these properties. The other thing that we've noticed, and this is actually a trend that we've seen in the States, is that hotel companies are actually purchasing older properties, completely redoing them and kind of turning them into upmarket, higher-end hotel properties. And one of the things that we've discovered from commentary online is that if the hotel is not in the right area, if it doesn't have the right surroundings, despite the fact that the rooms have been beautified and all the finishes are high-end, it won't really be considered a high-end property. So the rebranding, if you will, the re-architecture of that particular property needs to be done with careful consideration of where that property is actually located. Here's another category, something that's near and dear to my heart. I travel a lot. I depend on hotel Wi-Fi. I'm sure many of you have used hotel Wi-Fi to varying degrees of success. So what do people actually think? Again, analyzing thousands of opinions online, it's not surprising that the majority of discussion is around this category of negative, but why? So one of the big things, and this was a little bit surprising, is that people weren't so concerned with whether or not Wi-Fi was present or not. They were much more concerned about the fact that if it's there, it better be rock solid. It better work really, really well. It's very easy to anger hotel guests, right? Especially business guests who are there attempting to get work done while in their room and dealing with a very weak or sporadic connection. So it's an easy thing for them to invest in the infrastructure and simply say we have it. It's more important to make sure that it is absolutely rock solid and super reliable. This is even more prevalent than the it should be free aspect of the conversation. So how about consumer insights? Can't think of anything that's much more consumery than jeans, right? So how do Levi's jeans compare to Gap jeans? So this is an analysis of two products in the same product category with the exact same categories for analysis. So it really is sort of apples to apples in terms of the analysis. You'll notice that on the left, it's Levi's. On the right, it's Gap, which we didn't label. The positive and negative values are pretty similar, but where we see Levi's really jumping out here on the left is they fit great. So for Levi's, it's less about the prestige of the brand or of the jeans and more about, hey, they're just comfortable. So the comfort aspect, and we've seen a lot from Levi's around style and prestige and kind of being the cool jeans. but fit is really, really important to people as they're expressing their opinions about this particular brand online. For Gap, fit is important, but it's less prevalent. You get to see, I love them, it's a status symbol. These things are jumping out a bit more for Gap as a brand. So we did an analysis of tens of thousands of opinions to BlackBerry's launch of its new Z10 BlackBerry. We also did one in the US, which will follow, kind of contrast the opinions. It's not surprising here that the majority of the discussion around BlackBerry these days, everybody's sort of jumping into the fight and punching, giving the BlackBerry a black eye. The majority of the conversation is coming out as negative versus positive. But again, why? So BlackBerry is an industry follower. This is about lack of innovation. So again, if you're a marketer and you're trying to overcome what challenges your brand has, understanding how consumers perceive you and the challenges therein is really, really critical. So digging into the data and figuring out why people are less favorable to your brand is really important. Style, it being very similar in design to competition. Again, from a product design standpoint, if you're a brand manager and you're trying to figure out what to do next, you're trying to inform what to do next with your product, understanding that people are saying, hey, this thing looks like every other device out there, is very important. So I'm guessing you're probably familiar with American football and the Super Bowl and the fact that it is a really big event in the States. And advertising costs tens of millions of dollars per minute on this particular evening, this event. Not surprisingly, BlackBerry wanted to make a big splash with its product and put together an ad that aired during the Super Bowl to try and change people's minds, to give BlackBerry a second shot in the market. So here are, not even in positive and negative categories, but the opinions, the themes that emerged. So of the people that were discussing Super Bowl and BlackBerry, 35% of that discussion was really excited. They wanted to tune into the Super Bowl, not for the game, but to see the ad about the Z10, which is quite remarkable. However, in a very disappointing way for BlackBerry, 26% of those were very disappointed by the ad. So it's great that people were really excited to sort of show up and view the ad, if you will. It's terrible that the vast majority of that group really did not like it. 20% though did express the sense that BlackBerry was back in the game, that the new Z10 was going to change prospects for the company. This is again quite positive. Apparently BlackBerry removed the ad for a period of time from YouTube, and people, were upset by that. And almost 10% were actually quite confused by the messaging in the ad. And by the way, the messaging with the ad was focused around what the BlackBerry doesn't do. So they sort of said, it's going to be easier in the next 30 seconds to show you what the BlackBerry doesn't do than what it does. Kind of an interesting perspective on telling the story. You're probably all familiar with this horse meat scandal. It's been in the news. We took a look at almost 200,000 relevant posts to kind of see what people were thinking and feeling about this particular crisis. So there's obviously a lot of people talking about it. 30% of that online conversation, 37%, is simply talking about it, spreading the news. And this trend over this period of time, which is several weeks, is up 50%. So there's a lot of momentum behind people becoming aware of it and spreading the news. And then people are asking questions online. Which companies are involved? Which are safe? This one is actually going down. It's trending down over time. This one was kind of surprising. People specifically stating that horse meat's safe. It's food. Don't worry about it so much. However, label it so that we know. It shouldn't be a surprise. A lot of folks really upset at the government for the issues of not having control of the food chain. And then 6% simply expressing disgust, which is predictable. So how does this affect a specific brand? Well, one of the brands that took a hit during this horse meat issue was Bird's Eye, because they had some ready-made beef meals that were discovered to have some percentage of horse meat in them. So this has been particularly bad for Bird's Eye because in terms of branding, almost 80% of that conversation were people who were spreading the news about Bird's Eye and horse meat. Now, obviously, an extraordinarily small set of their products were affected by this, but a ton of the online conversation associated with it were putting those two concepts together in people's minds. This is not only a tactical but a strategic disaster for their brand. A lot of people telling jokes, 5%. Almost 10% of the conversation are expressing specific negative perceptions of Bird's Eye related to horse meat. And then 6% was just sort of talking about the low quality in general of Bird's Eye foods, but not relating it to horse meat. So this is just an example of how a bigger issue that you saw before can impact a specific brand and some of the things that you can learn inside of it. So if you're dealing with a crisis, again, understanding exactly how people think, what are the themes of that discussion, are very important if you're going to attempt to counter them over time. We talked a little bit about correlating data and the opportunity to look at social media data and market data and seeing if there's a connection. Is there an ability to do a predictive analysis, for example, with the data? So you're probably all familiar with the movie Bridesmaids. One of the things that we've been able to do is take a look at relevant positive opinions about this movie online, weekend by weekend, and compare that to box office performance, box office revenue. And we found almost a one-to-one correlation, 0.964, between the weekend's commentary online and then box office performance. Here is another example, The Hangover, Part 2, even tighter correlation. And this is also true when a movie is not doing well. So we have found that as soon as a movie starts doing its advertising promotion, several weeks, sometimes in many cases months before, the studios can get a sense of whether or not there's the right kind of excitement thematically online. And it can be an indicator, a predictor of whether or not that movie is going to take off and be a hit, or is going to lag, or needs to have its promotional spend or messaging rejiggered, changed, so that it can be more successful. So this has been a particularly strong aid to our clients in the motion picture industry. But again, more importantly, it's an example of how you can take market data, like revenue numbers, and social media data, like relevant positive sentiment about a particular movie, and map the two and bring them together and show how social media can have a strategic impact on the business. And that's really what it's all about.